it was done for an entire year before it was released. So, but you know, my biggest worry that it would feel dated, and it actually, since things got worse, it feels more timely, even though we didn't know any of this past year was going to happen.
There's like an introduction in the book where it said, no, this wasn't made in 2020. This was well before.
Well, and I wanted people to know that, because it's absolutely, the gas masks are not a reflection on the pandemic. It was just a reflection on, you know, the air was getting worse, you know, and I had been in China. I was in China in like 2016, I think, 24, I forget. But people wear masks in China to be polite in case they have a cold or a fever. They do it for the pollution, but they also, if they're getting a sniffle, they wear a mask. And so you saw a lot of masks, and people I talked to were like, oh yeah, I think I'm getting the flu, so I got my mask on. And they were very personalized, like, you since they had been doing this for so many years, and also because of pollution, people had very personalized masks, you know, like little girls had Hello Kitties, and you know, if you wanted to express rage that day or happiness that day, they had different, you know. So I thought that was so fascinating that I put it in the seeds, that people would personalize their masks if pollution got worse. And so it had nothing to do with a plague. There's no plague in the seeds. And then David was like, well, you know, I always like drawing old timey gas masks. So why don't we make it gas masks? You know, and also because the head looks so transformed in them with the kind of elephant trunk, that it became a good thing to sort of indicate aliens. You know, so even though the little girl has one on, it's mostly the aliens that wear them because they can hide behind them. And the other big thing about time in the seeds is that it was written, I had outlined the whole thing when Obama was still president. So there was no Trump yet. There was no fake news. There was no, you know, Trump election. I mean, he was around. I mean, I actually had Poison Ivy torture Trump in a Batman story in 1994. Trump was putting up all his towers, and everyone knew Trump in New York because of because he would put these gigantic, ugly buildings up and cast shadows on people that used to have light. And so, inspired by a Trump building in like 93, 94, John Van Fleet and I did a Batman story where one of the Trump towers cast a shadow on her ledge in Arkham. Is that how you say it? Arkham.
Oh, the asylum, Arkham, yeah.
Yeah, Arkham Asylum. And so her little plants in her windowsill die, and she flips out and she goes after Trump. And his name was Donald Trump in the comic. And then at the last minute, the editors were like, Annie, is this a real person? Yeah, it's a real person. Okay, let's call him Dan Trumple or something else like that.
Keep the initials, but change it just a little bit.
Yeah, just change it a little bit. But in the first page, there's a huge gold T going up, and John Van Fleet did this spectacular double page spread with the gold T rising, and then, you know, everyone going, oh, I can't sunbathe on my roof anymore. Oh, you know, I can't, you know, where's my light? Where's my light? And then it's like Poison Ivy, where's my light? You know?
Did you ever have anyone ask you about that during these 4 years?
I don't think so. I think maybe no, I don't think so. I think maybe there was somebody pointed it out on Facebook or something, but no, for the most part, I don't think most people know that Dan Trumbull in the comic is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because you know, I mean, DC Legal, of course, I went, yes, yeah, I know. I've been bad girl. Yes, I'll change the name. And actually back then he was very litigious, and now he probably his chances at having deep pockets to be litigious have reversed to empty pockets. So,
Yeah, worst case scenario, he'll block you on Twitter and that's it.
yes.
And
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't want to be blocked by Trump.
that's like a badge of honor now. You see people
Yes.
posting like, I finally did it. I made it.
I made it.
I,
So the other thing is that fake news wasn't like a thing yet. I mean, all these things, I keep hearing the word unprecedented, but when people are like, this is an unprecedented thing, actually everything is precedented. It's not a new thing, fake news. Fake news goes way back in history, and everything that they say is unprecedented actually has historical underpinnings going way back. As long as there's been humans, these things have been happening. And so, but at the same time, having a news office that's promoting fake news stories, like we found, the Loch Ness monster or something like that, because they're hunting hoaxes to a certain degree. They're just propagating fake news stories to make sales, but not in a completely evil way.
it's like clickbait culture. It kind of sums
Yeah.
up Twitter, where you see a thing and you think that's real without doing any
Yes.
research behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good if there was, I like that that website. Is it called Snoops or Snopes? The one
I'm not
where
familiar.
it's a website. I think it's SNOPES, and if you're getting facts and alternate facts, you can go there and they will either debunk or support, because they're a what do you call, a neutral site that just says, really, you think that wearing a mask is killing you? You can go there and they will gather all the science about it, and or really, you think Hillary Clinton is eating babies in a pizza basement while here, so it's I think we probably need more sites like that are like independent, neutral, like, okay, here's all your sources, and here, and here's the truth. So so we wrote a story that was not a commentary on fake news or the rise of authoritarianism, which, the main alien represents the rise of authoritarianism, or a plague. But somehow in the 4 years since we wrote it, so we wanted people to know that we weren't writing it about today.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to talk to David yet, but were there any changes you had to make or any tweaks you had to make during the time between the actual like single issue release and the book release?
Yeah, there's a great issue of, do you know Hassan's Panel by Panel?
Yeah, Hassan Utsmanullah.
Yeah, he did a really deep dive into the seeds, and it was it's amazing because, and I'll do a plug for him if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
It's only $3 to get a deep dive into the seeds. And so in that issue of Panel by Panel, David shares his drawings for what the seeds originally was supposed to be, which was a comic called Scoop, where the emphasis on hoax hunters was big. It was like a 50s tabloid where it's like, Bat Boy spotted on Fifth Avenue, and it was so much fun. It was such a fun version of the seeds. It was its first incarnation. But then when the fake news thing rose, we threw it all out, because we can't put out a comic about a magazine news office that is specifically chasing fake, not hoax hunting. It was like, did your robot murder you?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So it was sort of sci-fi in that it was kind of like, what if someone did track down Bigfoot? What if there was a story about a murder bot? A little Black Mirror like. And so we basically trashed that, took the idea of the Scoop newsroom and folded it into a bigger narrative where we focused on the love story between the alien race and Lola.
Mm-hmm. Out of all of those, my favorite like side story or slash hoax is the billionaire who's trying to leave Earth and escape to Mars. And it's like, yeah, no, Elon Musk could do that tomorrow.
Well, that was weird because I like to talk about the sort of mysterious and kind of instinctual, intuitive process of working with David, in that I write, tight, full scripts, and they're very simple. They're like one line for what each panel should be, and the dialogue. And I have this weird thing I do in comics where I try to keep the dialogue and the image descriptions to exactly one page, because all my years in film, it's, and a 90-page script is a 90-minute film, sorta. It's a page per minute. And so with comics, you never want to go over a page of instructions, unless you're doing like something intense like Watchmen, where Alan Moore is like, and in the corner you're gonna see a clock ticking backwards, or whatever.
It's like very specific. It'll tell you what the color of like this pencil on the desk is.
Pencil is pink and it signifies the coming of a whatever. So and I have done scripts like that, but always only because there was some detail that was super important. But with David, it was kind of like, I knew he was a master at storytelling, and so the idea was to invite him to play, and so the scripts, even when he said, he mapped out how he wanted the scenes to look. He said 9-panel grids, but we're going to do it in chapters, and we're going to have left side opening big page, 3-panel, and so he laid out all the instructions. And so I worked the script in to fit his idea for how the book should flow. But even for the 9-panel pages, I would only give him like 4 or 5 panels so that he could decide, do I zoom in on the apple? Do I repeat the apple? I have the worm coming out of the apple, whatever he wanted to do. And
it's up to the artist to decide the specifics, but it's still kind of like stay within this, parameter.
Yeah, exactly. And I even, there's a weird thing. There was an interview with Christopher Walken once, and he said, the first thing I do when I get a script is I remove all the punctuation, because it's insulting to tell an actor where the pauses should be. And I feel sort of the same way about bold words, like when you bold a word and say, like, I am going to the store now, it's sort of, I want the reader to find those moments in their heads. And so it was a similar thing with David. I wanted David to be able to decide also where the camera was. The script has very little, like occasionally I would do ant-eye view, God's eye view, but I would never say anything about like obviously horizontal or vertical, or in a normal script you'd be like, he's racing to catch the train, maybe horizontal panels would work here, so I didn't give any of that stuff for this comic, because so that he could play all he wanted. And then also even then he took the script and he juggled all the scenes, and things dropped out of the story, and why they dropped out was a bit of a mystery to me, because it was like maybe he couldn't, he didn't feel like drawing a herd of horses or whatever it was. That was a herd of buffalo. Originally there was more buffalo in it, and bison, and a lot of other stuff. And then I would come back in after he drew and I'd say, well, the fact that the bees are following Lola and we're watching the bees go underground, like that was an important thing to me, both as a metaphor for activism and going underground, and the fact that the bees end up, I don't want to give a spoiler away, but it was important that the bees were going underground. Honeybees don't normally go underground. Honeybees, they're not ground bees. And so it was important to me that I establish this. But so for whatever reason, when something like that wasn't in the comic, then I had to like rewrite some scene where, I was sure people were getting the proper subliminals and foreshadowing in order for the end to work. Because, you try and put everything in the pictures so that you can pull all the words out. And then if something doesn't make it into the pictures, you have to figure out another way to get it in there.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to go back a little bit, and I was wondering if the concise scripts came from your film experience, or if that was just something that you had been doing before.
I've been doing, well, it's interesting because in the early days of Marvel, we all wrote Marvel style, which is, a plot, but my plots, I never really wrote completely Marvel style because my page breakdowns had all the dialogue. So, I never understood how Johnny Romita Jr. was going to draw, Daredevil looking at a bunch of skateboard kids if he didn't know the skateboard kids were saying, what the hell are you doing here? He needs the dialogue to put the look on the face. So I kind of wrote these scripts that were not quite broken down into panel 1, panel 2, but they were basically, I have always done my own thumbnails. So I take a piece of paper and I do the grid and I'm like, okay, because when you're really early on in comics, you tend to make basic mistakes like giving an artist 2 things to draw on one panel. Like
someone's drinking a cup and then they throw it across the room.
Yeah, she reaches for her coffee and spills it. An artist doesn't want to have somebody reach for a coffee and spill it. You have to have separate panels for that. And even better, even more atmospheric would be, like she's not looking and the reader knows it's coming, or you want to orchestrate that moment, which would be reflected by, is the person exhausted? Why did they miss it? Reaching for the cup? Do they have a disease starting? What are they? Have they just taken a drug? So each moment has to be laid out so the artist not only just has to draw one action, but can break that action further if needed. So to answer your question, my scripts were Marvel style scripts that were bordering on full scripts. And the main place that I would do very little orchestrating was the fight scenes, because usually artists love drawing fight scenes. And even though I fight, I do karate and judo, and I used to box back when I was younger. You don't want orchestrating a fight scene is something that you want to give to the artist. So like you say, Hulk smash for page 1, page 2, and maybe part of the story is that Hulk smash on, kid's Christmas toy, and, so you put these little things in, but the artist would do the battle orchestration. You'd give them like beginning point, end point. So, and then, yes, I spent 10 years as a screenwriter, and for screenwriting, it's similar, so you have to break down as far as possible. And in a script, you kind of, it's similar in that you give camera angles so the reader understands whether or not the character is powerful, diminished, in the shadows. That's, you give the camera angles as part of the language of screenwriting, but you're going to give that over to the actor, director, cinematographer. So, it gets back to Christopher Walken's comment about removing punctuation. There's a lot of stuff you put in scripts, but what I do at the top of my script is I always say everything is a suggestion, break down it however you wish. So it's always an invitation to play. And on monthly comics, most people can't play. We're under intense deadlines. They might have 6 pages due tomorrow. So the panel breakdown is there for them if they don't have the time to think further. But if they don't have 6 pages due that night, they can fool around.
I don't know, did your journalism experience kind of help with that, where you're not supposed to do these long, rambling paragraphs? It's like, say what you need to say and then move on to
Yeah,
the
I
next
think
thing.
you're absolutely right there. I think maybe my scripts used to say way more than was necessary. And in film experience, it's like you take a shot, you grab what you grab. You're grabbing chunks of life. You're just grabbing chunks of life, and that's it. So yeah, I would say that my film work, and especially my documentary work, in documentary film, you're always looking for something off the main characters. What are they doing with their hands? Is their foot tapping? You're always looking for indicators as to the person's inner state, their environment. Is there trucks going by all the time and the noise is increasing, and that affects who they are. So you're always grabbing shots.
Mhm.
And I think that very much affected my later comic work in terms of adding lots of shots of things that were off main action, and then letting the artist decide how much of that they wanted to put in.
Yeah, I don't know if you're an Akira Kurosawa fan, but normally I have like Kurosawa's movies playing in the background at any given moment. And something he does regularly is what you were saying. Like, he gives a character a specific tick. Like
Yeah.
in Yojimbo, he has like the shoulder roll, or in
Yeah.
Seven Samurai, that one dude keeps rubbing his head after he shaved it.
Yeah. No,
It's
that
all
is, yeah. I love that stuff. I absolutely adore that stuff. When I teach, when I was teaching film in Haiti, I would use films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly,
Mhm.
to just because that film is full of visual ticks that introducing characters. I mean, that is a genius film to use when you're teaching film. That opening alone has so many clues in it. A lot of them are in the soundtrack. And that's like one of the frustrating things in comics, is that there's no soundtrack, because one time I interviewed Walter Murch, who I think is one of the all-time geniuses, and he removes sound. Removing sound is an important part of film. So like Harry Caul in Coppola's conversation, when he walks across a room, you can't hear his footsteps because Walter Murch took them out of the soundtrack. And it adds to the mystery of what this man is going through, that you can't hear him stepping. And there are amazing moments that Walter Murch put together in The Godfather, like, the moment when Michael Corleone shoots, kills for his first time, you hear the L train screeching. And why is the L train screeching outside when we haven't heard the traffic in a long time? Why do we hear that now? Well, we're supposed to go, oh, we're on edge. And then suddenly the translation of the Italian drops away. And you're like, why am I not hearing what they're saying anymore? Meaning, the translation at least. It's because Michael Corleone is no longer listening to the chatter. And then when he goes to the bathroom, gets the gun, I'm assuming everyone knows The Godfather. I'm not spoiling it for anyone.
No, it's been up for a while if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's a great film. And then he comes back to the table after he murders for the first time. Opera kicks in, and that's Coppola and Walter Murch's way of saying he has now gone from an ordinary man wanting to go to college and dating Diane Keaton's character to the Godfather. So opera indicates myth. So when you're doing a comic, somebody who's worked in film, you're always like, what would the soundtrack be here? And then it gets very frustrating because you can't add or pull out sounds. I mean, we have sound effects.
Yeah, I don't remember if David did the lettering also,
Yes, he
but
did.
was that okay? He did. So
Yeah.
was that something you had to communicate
Well,
on?
I put sound effects in where I wanted them, and I think a lot of things happened in the very first issue. Like I noticed that he was, um, the first issue, I had sent him kind of a rough draft so that he could start thinking about the plot. And he just broke the whole plot down, early. And um, that's when I realized I needed to do full scripts because, uh, but also little things like sound effects. He decided where and when and how big they were. And so I literally, I think I stopped putting sound effects in because he was going to figure that he wanted to do that himself. So a lot of it is trust, and it's like a little bit like I have to give up a little bit here so that he can do that, and it goes back and forth. It goes back and forth like that.
So there was the delay of the book, but it's out now. But are you happy with it? Or
Yeah,
have you had
yeah.
complaints? Are people just like, oh no, we have regrets? Or is it like,
Not really with the seeds. I mean, it's give me 6 months because I tend to not. I won't look at it for a long time, and then in 6 months, I'll pick it up and I'll read it, and then I'll see everything that's wrong with it. And I already can tell my next comic. This comic was supposed to be complex because one of the goals was to show. Um, when I dropped the making it all about the scoop office, which was going to have a lot of fun, goofy shenanigans, I had sort of organized that to be a very funny comic, where there was lots of chasing of, you know,
yeah,
chasing of animals and murder bots and things. I think there was a killer chicken. I can't remember. There were all kinds of things. A talking chicken. There was or something like that. I decided that I shouldn't just do hoax hunting news, tabloid news. I wanted to do real news. And because I was a journalist for so long, I know that there's no such thing as subjectivity in journalism. I mean, you can, yes, find the actual fact that, yes, the world is round and not flat. There are things that you can definitely you could have facts, but then a lot of it becomes what do you choose to put in, what do you choose to take out. I do a film of a party, I shoot a party, I decide what to leave out. That guy that got so drunk he puked in his own boots, do I leave that in the documentary, or out of respect to him do I take it out? And then how does that change the nature of the reality of the party? So when you're doing journalism and documentary film, you're making those decisions over and over and over and over and over. And so especially my documentary partner, Wendy Johnson, and I made 2 films in Baluchistan. And one was about the tribes in Baluchistan, because it has a tribal system. And then one was about a falcon hunt. But then once everyone invited us into their homes to film them, it alters how you make the film, because you learn a lot of things that you only learned because they invited you into their home. And you want to be respectful. How does that change how you make the film? So what was the question? Oh, so once we decided that the Seeds was going to have multiple points of view, it has the point of view of the woman who is making fake bees. Bees are dying. Science says, let's just make fake bees. What does that mean? And then we have the point of view of the bees. So it was important for me to have the woman making bees, the naturalist who's saying, let's just plant more flowers, the bees will come back. And then we have the bees. So because we wanted 50 different sides to the story, it has all these different points of view, which makes it an episodic, somewhat fragmented as you keep leaping around,
mhm.
So to answer your question, 6 months from now, I have a feeling I'll read it and I'll go, the next story I want to do, I want it to have like only one point of view and be a lot simpler.
It's just going to be the murderous chicken for 4 issues.
Yes, it's going to be the talking chicken and the murder bot and their relationship.
Just like a road trip movie with
a road trip between a talking chicken and a murder bot. And of course the Nessie's hitchhiking.
yeah.
Loch Ness monsters hitchhiking, and they're camping and there's Bigfoot.
I'll buy it. I'll pre-order it now. I'm gonna go to the comic shop.
You know what? I would so love to write that comic.
6 months from now, I'm going to have to ask you how you feel about the book again. But is there anything else you're working on, or anything that you can talk about?
Well, I'm doing something very strange right now. I'm drawing. I've never done this before. I draw some of my paintings up there that I do. And I've always done my own thumbnails, but I've never sent them to the artist because I feel like that's rude. They're the artist. I do it more to make sure it can be drawn. And so right now I even have some here. I'm doing we're talking at my paint table. So I'm drawing. I'm trying to find my next story by drawing. So I've been posting some of the drawings on Instagram, but you can see a woman being chased. Yeah. What's she being chased by? And this dude, a lot of times I don't even know where this stuff comes from. It just comes, and then I'm drawing but now I'm starting to have an idea what the story is. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have to find someone who feels like publishing a non-superhero story, which is not that easy, and then, but I mean, I come from, I came into my arts consciousness in the 80s in New York when everyone made fanzines. So, if you have to do the story yourself, and even if I draw it myself, I can always Xerox it, staple it together, and go back to Artist Alley with my little self-published.
Yeah, 100% independent.
Yeah, and I actually would find that would be really fun, because so many artists. I remember in the 80s, one of the early conventions, the early comic conventions, there were always these two really, really sweet guys that were always drawing turtles, and that became Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. But for years before it came out, they would be at conventions drawing their turtles. And, part of me would love to, even though I've had a comic career, I would love to go back to being one of the newbies in Artist Alley with your fanzine, that you've Xeroxed and stapled.
Which is like the really esoteric thing. Like, you go to the table, you see Daredevil there, you see, the seeds, and then there's like, wait, what is this? What's going on here? Yeah,
exactly. And I'd sell them for 50 cents.
Just I'm about it. We kind of covered it last time, but the most exciting thing right now isn't, to me, the superhero stuff. It's underground and indie stuff with people, like you said, writing and drawing their own thing and putting it out there. Maybe they have a web store. Maybe they send it out to a few comic shops. They have 50 issues printed, and that's it. But
that's actually how I buy comics. And that's one of the things I miss about conventions, is that I always find and there's a great event in New York called Mocha, and it's all independent comics, and it's table after table after table of people self-publishing, and I usually spend more money there than at anything I attend all year, because I love supporting those little, and I'll just buy as many as I can see, and then and I don't mean ever to diss the superhero narrative, because the superhero narrative is so much fun, and it's almost like comic creators are having a conversation with each other in the superhero narrative, because it's like, he did that riff with Batman, now I'm going to do this riff with Batman, and it's going to reference this old riff with Batman. It's going to like say, here's a little bit of Denny O'Neil with a touch of, Frank, and so that is a really fun thing to do, which is just, for the character I wrote the longest was Daredevil, but I definitely look back at Roger McKenzie and influenced by what Frank Miller did, and then you do yours, and someone comes along and takes the riff further,
Yeah.
which is more fun than when a writer comes on and said, let me obliterate the past,
Yeah, I know that last interview we did, that was more of the fanboy questions, but
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to talk about Denny O'Neil because as a fan, learning that he, passed away last year, that
Yeah.
was a big deal. But the fact that, you two worked together, he was a mentor figure. I was wondering if you ever got to talk to him, or, how did that affect you?
Well, I went to see Denny. Denny and I have a very long friendship, and I credit Denny along with, Archie Goodwin and Louise Simonson, and pretty much everybody I worked, Mark Grunwald, everybody that mentored me at Marvel Comics really powerfully affected my comic writing. I think through Mark Grunwald, I learned what treasures these characters are, because Mark was, deep into the multiverse, the shared universe. And from Louise Simonson, I learned how to be an editor. She taught me everything from people like Al Milgrom and Carl Potts. It was through working with them that I understood how to take an artist's thumbnails and give them notes so that the story would be better. Little things like, why is that hand out of frame if the reaching is important, like little things about where to move the camera. But from Denny, he really told me it was okay to be a journalist in comics, because I wanted to be a journalist and I love documentary film, and he really encouraged me to put life into comics. I would say that I might have been a completely different comic book writer if it wasn't for Denny, because Denny had done that with Batman and Green Arrow. And maybe Denny and I were both wished we were, and I went on to be a journalist, but I think he did a lot of journalism. So Denny and I stayed really close. We would have, we would meet for lunch or dinner in the city after I left Marvel, and we kept up a pretty strong friendship. And then he moved out of the city, and he met this wonderful Mary Mack, I think her name. He moved out of the city, and we kind of lost touch a little bit, only because that's what happens when someone moves out of New York City. You just like, we're too selfish and entrenched in New York City to ever go to the suburbs, we're evil that way. And then when I realized he was not doing well, his son, who's wonderful, we realized we had a lot of connections, Larry O'Neil and I, because Larry knew my students that I was teaching in Haiti, because he was doing a Haiti program, film, exchange thing at the college where he teaches. So Larry very generously drove me to see Denny when he was in the hospital. And Denny was just as sharp and wonderful as ever. I mean, just like so witty. And he was always a kind of discombobulated, I'm not really on the planet guy. And he didn't seem that concerned with the fact that he was having physical issues.
Was this more recent? Was this in the past couple of years?
This was right before he passed.
Okay.
And he wasn't, I was like, Denny, if you don't do your physical therapy, you're going to have trouble walking when you get out of here. And he was like, oh yeah, I can walk. Don't worry. You know, and I mean, he was very kind of still in his Denny brilliance and wit. And then I was planning on going to see Denny again when the pandemic happened and everybody went into lockdown, and I couldn't see Denny, and then he passed. So, yeah.
I'm glad that of the, you know, the legendary creators, people remember him and he got the appreciation he deserved. And
He got a New York Times obituary. You know, they don't give it, the New York Times doesn't give obituaries to many people compared to the population.
Yeah.
And they honored him with a wonderful obituary, which was really profoundly moving for me to see that, because someone at the New York Times understood his role in comics and how his role in comics was just so important, you know, with his There's No Hope in Crime Alley and his junkie stories and Denny putting his own personal struggle with alcoholism into Iron Man's story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, so it's always nice when the real world acknowledges something deep in the comic universe.
Yeah. It's like more than just, you know, like disposable, colorful books. Like
Yeah.
they impact people in a real way, which I appreciate.
Like for the Seeds, obviously, I read a lot of science magazines, a lot of, you know, to get that conversation we were talking about between you know, it's sort of a triangle. It's the Elon Musk character trying to get to Mars, which, by the way, again, to reveal the mysterious process between me and David, came from an image David sent me. David just suddenly sent me an image of an astronaut floating in space, but he was like a skull. He was dead. And that inspired me to put the, you know, rich billionaire who wants to go to the Mars and make that part of the story. And then I was able to add that little extra thing that if you crash landed on a planet that had all the things you need for potential life on a planet, would the dead body grow a seed? You know, so it became like, you know, I put that image up on my desktop and I looked at it for a while until that arc came to me that I could put in the Seeds. So, and for The Naturalist and the Queenmaker, I read a lot of, especially stuff about mushrooms and fungi, and there was just a story today. There's a story about how they could, you know, reclaim and neuter the gases that come out of factories with some science thing. And people are talking about how, wait a minute, doesn't that mean that gives an excuse for factories to just pollute and pollute and pollute if we can add something that converts the pollution to something else? And so that really is that moment of, when does science intervention, like maybe you could create robotic bees that would pollinate and hop from flower to flower. Maybe you could do that.
Yeah,
But
it's like, when does the cycle end though? Like you talked about unprecedented. It's like, no, we've been doing this for a long time. Like we can't just planet hop every, you know, few.
Exactly. It's like when I was in college, I was such a mess. Like I was an art student, so I was always like painting. And, you know, I would do this disposable apartment thing. I would trash an apartment, stop doing the dishes, never wash them, wreck the apartment by painting everywhere, and then just get a new apartment, you know? It was like, and it's like, it's almost like that. I mean, that's the kind of thing you do when you're like in college, you know, trash an apartment and then just run. So, you know, we can't just trash this planet and hop to another one.
I mean, at least there's the silver lining where the billionaires aren't safe either. You go out there, you don't have the means to survive. So
yeah, and that's like the end point of the conversation between the two sides of that coin with the naturalist and the queenmaker. it's not that spoilery, but he says, have fun with your Vermeer, because she's so wealthy. Vermeer painting it's one of the rarest things, is to own a Vermeer. They're spectacular but rare.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is the billionaire. She's the top in the art world is that she owns a Vermeer. And he just says, have fun with that Vermeer. I don't know where it's going to get you in a, apocalyptic world.
Yeah, the world's burning and you're just like, can someone take this?
Yes, exactly.
One cup of water that isn't covered in dirt, please. Just yeah, no, it's not unprecedented. All of this can happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
We can wake up tomorrow and every Twitter notification, every news notification, it's like the bees are dying.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is trapped in space. Aliens are here. Yeah. Is there anything that you think we left out, or anything you want to throw out there?
No, I would just say that The Seeds is a indie comic. It's not a mainstream comic. It's not a superhero comic, but I hope people read it, because the point of The Seeds is to spark conversation about the world. And I also want to say that no interpretation of The Seeds is wrong. We pose questions without clear answers, and the few people that have read it, I don't think many people have read it yet, they have wonderful takes on it. They have, somebody wrote a review the other day that was like, everything is being harvested, news is being harvested, bees are harvesting honey, and it was like, I didn't realize that about my own comic, and that's a great viewpoint. So I love when someone reads it and they see something in the comic that me and David did not intend and did not see ourselves. So it's kind of another invitation to play.